I'm Tony Diaz, and I've heard you've been talking about us. Some of you have said some nice things, some of you have said some not so nice things, but we've never spoken together until now, because you're about to cross to the other side. Donald Trump's stormy past has finally caught up with them. Now, this is not a morality issue. Y'all knew Trump was freaky when you elected him. And you've seen several evangelical leaders on cable news explaining how they got no beef with Trump playing hide the beef. All they cared about was getting a Supreme Court justice who would overturn Roe versus Wade. They wanted to keep their tax exemption status, and they wanted to be able to openly endorse the next presidential candidate after the impeachment. This also isn't about the law. Think about it. Donald Trump pardoned convicted racist, terrible Sheriff Joe Arpaio from Arizona. So you know he's going to pardon Manafort. You know he's going to pardon his sons if they ever go to jail. You know he's going to pardon himself. Heck, he probably would have pardoned Charles Manson if he hadn't died, just to get the American public used to this craziness. I'll tell you what the real problem is. I've talked to some of the 8.9% of Hispanics who voted for Trump. Some of them voted for Trump because he's an alleged billionaire. And they thought that somehow, because he had money, they'd make money. Now, they didn't think they'd make billions. Some of them really thought they'd make millions. Querían ser millonarios. Well, that hasn't happened. And in fact, after Trump's tax scam, only other corporate millionaires and billionaires have made tons of money. Working class folks, some managed to get a $1 an hour raise. So maybe that's $40 a week. Maybe that's $36 a week after taxes. But these folks still believe that Trump is a master negotiator. And that's the problem. A porn star has gotten the best of Donald Trump after getting his worst. And we should probably give credit to Stormy Daniels and her legal team. They managed to out-Trump Trump using the tactics that he perfected. Now, maybe in all fairness, his team could have been trying out a new TV show. Maybe they were brainstorming a game show called Are You Smarter Than a Porn Star? Because so far they're not. They've released some lame excuses for their blunders. So they said that they forgot to sign the contract. Even Texas got a shout out. Evidently, there's a notary in Dallas who they're blaming for not signing the document. Even the fake name, David Dennison, is the alias used for this whole shenanigans. I want you to think about this. We, the American public, have cracked the code on the alias the president used to force a gag order on a porn star. Who knows? Maybe after all of this, Stormy Daniels may wind up on Trump's cabinet, especially since evidently he already had her on his desk. Imagine that. Secretary of the Interior, Stormy Daniels. Or maybe Secretary of Trump's Interior. I'll tell you what, don't blame us. We here at The Other Side TV are just here to facilitate. So we've come up with the Spanish versions of titles for President Stormy Daniels' possible coming books or films. First title, Noches Calientes en la Casa Blanca. Second possible title, Sexo Malo con Trump. I'm Tony, and you've crossed over to the other side.
Hello, I'm Jacob Monti, the founder of Monti and Ramirez. 20 years ago, we started this law firm dedicated to helping the rights of immigrants pursue the American dream. We are here to help you with your immigration needs. We help families and businesses in immigration matters. When it matters, when it's your family, call the best. Call Monti and Ramirez.
Thanks so much for tuning in to The Other Side. And this segment is called The Other Side. It's the DNA for our entire program and our entire channel. And we bring together a Mexican-American conservative to talk about important issues to Latinos with a Mexican-American progressive. And I'm joined with my partner in crime and law, Jacob Monti Esquire. ¿Cómo estás?
Great to see you, Tony.
And of course, I'm Tony Diaz, the Librotraficante, as far left as you can get on this continent. But we're here in Houston, Texas, home of the world champion Houston Astros. So we're going to be talking about immigration as translated through baseball, especially since we're in this weird moment where Latinos are talked about. We could argue about certain dog whistles that talk badly about our culture. But also, we're celebrating because Jose Altuve, a Venezolano, was named Most Valuable Player of the American League. You can't get more American than that. So in this weird times, we're trying to bring all the pieces together and figure out exactly what's going on. And my argument is to play baseball, you got to get over the wall. So Jacob, a lot of folks talk about these baseball players, and I point out that, hey man, they're all from other countries, and folks say, yeah, but they immigrated the right way. You know, you as a leading lawyer in the country, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, certainly, and we've done a lot of work for professional baseball players, a lot of work for the Yankees. But there's a special visa category, but it's limited. If you're a professional baseball player, there's visa available. But if you're a fashion model, there's visas available.
So if you're ugly or can hit a fastball, or can't hit a fastball, so if you're ugly or can't hit a fastball, you're out of luck for these visas.
Absolutely. So yes, they came in legally, but most immigrants don't have the opportunity for these types of visas.
But these are very limited. Let's get that clear. So
absolutely.
Very small percentage.
Yes, they come over with visas, but it's a very limited visa category. And you only get that visa if you have an offer from a professional baseball team.
So there's no way to really get around that.
No.
It's got to be very clear, which is crazy. Now, on top of it too, I imagine that a lot of these baseball players, you got them come from Mexico, Venezuela,
Dominican Republic.
Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and also Cuba. So let's talk about Cuba because, of course, Cubanos have benefited from a law that was specific just to them that I think touched on this as well.
Absolutely.
Tell folks about that.
During the Cold War era, they got the Cuban Adjustment Act. It basically gave Cubans automatic permanent residency if they got to the U.S. And a lot of them came from Mexico, and then they would apply for asylum here and automatically get their permanent residency.
Well, that's why they call that the dry foot rule, right?
Well, yes. In the Clinton era, he actually came up with a rule that said if Cubans made it to the soil of the U.S., they would not be returned. But if they were intercepted at sea before they made it to the shore, then they would be sent back to Cuba.
Intercepted at sea. That's got to be a whole other segment. So folks got to dodge the Coast Guard, I suppose, to get through. And even on the beach, I guess.
If you made it to the beach, you were fine.
God.
But Mexicans didn't have that opportunity. I mean, the Mexicans that are here without status, they made it to the shore. If Mexicans had a dry foot policy, we wouldn't have millions of undocumented Mexicans.
So let's get that clear. That rule was only for
Cubans.
Cubanos.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And that's what's unfair about the foes of immigrants is that they point out that they want to do it the legal way, but the legal way is available to Cubans, professional baseball players, and fashion models. It's a very limited category.
Now, I know this all sounds complicated, so I'm going to make it easy for you. In history, it's better to have been a dry foot than a wet back. And I can say that because I'm Chicano and I'm Raza, so only I can say that. If you're watching this and you're not Raza, be careful how you use that term, okay?
Well, look, I agree with you that wetback is an offensive term. To me, it's fighting words. But, Tony, it's actually less offensive than a term that we see on Fox News, on Drudge Report. These are media sources that I consult regularly in case you didn't know what they were. But what we hear is illegal. Illegal. The illegals want this. Illegals.
Well, I heard that at a donut shop too. I mean, people are using that word because they hear it.
Number one, it's bad English, but number two,
because we talk a lot about grammar on this show. Okay,
it's certainly bad English, but I actually prefer illegal alien, undocumented worker. But when you say illegal, it's a lifetime sentence.
I actually think wetback's a better word. It describes what they did. They crossed the border to work. And it also describes what they're doing today. They're doing hard jobs that U.S. workers aren't doing.
And it's just as insulting. So you're saying people should keep in mind that the word illegals is just as insulting as the word wetbacks, but you're saying even less precise.
I think it's less offensive. Wetback is less offensive, and yet we hear people on mainstream media use the term illegal, and I think it's very offensive. It's a lifetime sentence for something they did to support their family, to make this country better, because let's be honest, they're working. They're working in meat processing plants, on farms. They're not here on vacation. They're making our lives better.
No, even to go back to the baseball metaphor or analogy that we're talking about, you talk about all these baseball players from the Dominican Republic. If you go to Dominican Republic, there's baseball camps everywhere. So it's also not like these kids came and tried to hit a fastball and then like they can or can't. They've been cultivated and groomed for these small amounts of special visas. So it's not a mistake that's happening.
No. And Americans love baseball.
We love it.
Why can't we get Americans to love immigrants?
It's like, you're at a baseball game, it's common ground, you don't get asked for your papers, you better have a job to pay for the hot dogs and the adult beverages because it's expensive. But there's a perfect metaphor. So stealing is bad, except in baseball. When you steal second base, that's good. If you do it really good, we want you to steal some more, especially for our team. Let's all get on the same team. I think the other part, too, is that the other metaphor is that if you want to be good at baseball, you got to hit the ball over the wall. So I think if you want to play ball, you got to get over the wall. So let's talk about the wall. First of all, I'm against it because we haven't thought through it. Plus, it's kind of useless. So I'm going to try and look at the other side and get over just an emotional response to the wall. Now recently, you had a deal for DACA that evidently could have included, I guess, 1-point-something million dreamers.
1.8 million dreamers.
That could have then gotten legal status. And
even citizenship is what the president said.
That's what they were talking about, right? And then also perhaps there was some funding for the wall that will go with it. I think it was a certain amount. But here's my issue. That's not the equivalent of full wall funding, because that to me sounds like 10% of the undocumented community. And part of me too says, okay, I'm going to get over the wall emotionally and say, okay, if you want the full funding, document all the undocumented. So you get 100% of the wall funding only if you fund, or if there's a path for citizenship for 100% of the undocumented, just like Reagan did. So Reagan had done it. You know, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first off, can we agree that if you're really a bad hombre, if you're a wanted criminal who's killed somebody or raped somebody, that you don't have a right to stay here?
Is there any confusion? So maybe this is eye-opening. Because, if you're beating up people, hurting people, killing people, get out of here.
Yeah.
Get out of here. Like, that's common ground right there. So.
No, and I knew what the answer was, but the media tries to portray anyone who's in favor of immigration reform as being in favor of open borders, and you're not in favor of open borders. I'm not in favor of open borders. We're talking about people that
because there's got to be some rules in baseball.
Absolutely.
What's foul? What's fair? What's a home run? What's a strikeout?
I agree with your proposition. If you're not a criminal, you should be able to stay. And if he comes up, I say if the president and the Congress come up with a plan that legalizes or gives status to most of the undocumented here that aren't criminals, then he should get the wall. Tony, I've never had a problem with a wall because who's going to build it? Our folks are going to build it, right?
Right. And actually, the problem I've had with the wall is the stereotypes around it, and really that it seems ineffective. At the end of the day, it's like, well, if you're really dead set on it, fix this just like Reagan did. And that's the other part that blows my mind. It was a Republican who actually had real immigration reform way back when, and now the Republicans aren't thinking deeply about it. I guess they got to come to the other side to really think deep about it. Okay, I got a list of beefs I'll pick up with you later, because I don't want that word illegal alien anywhere, but evidently there's room for it in the immigration laws, but we'll get to it. But hey, ladies and gentlemen, you have crossed over to the other side. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
Trump's idea of chain migration is a figment of his imagination, so allow me to provide a real explanation. If you're an American citizen and marry someone born across the border, you can ask to have their status changed, and she can ask for her son or daughter. She can ask for her parents too, and in fact, with Melania Trump, you kind of did that too. But in the end, that adds up to just a few. So don't go insane and call it chain migration. All Trump wants is anti-grandma legislation. I'm Tony, and you've crossed over to the other side. Donald Trump says he has the best words, even though they're small words, even though they're absurd words. So let's have a word about Donald's words, because lit Trump has led to Trump lit. Believe it or not, even though Donald Trump has probably never read anything longer than a tweet, he's been a big boost to the publishing industry. In fact, there will probably be more books written about Trump than Lincoln, and I'm making this prediction before the impeachment. When it's all said and done, the paper trail for Donald Trump will probably be the longest in history. Of course, not every single sheet is going to be complimentary. And in fact, the more you roast Trump, the more copies of your book get sold. So let's take a look at some of these bestsellers. Let's start with Fire and Fury by Michael Wolff. It was a runaway bestseller, and you knew it was going to be hot because Donald Trump tried to suppress it, which only leads to more sales. This book was so hot, it got people on Team Trump fired. How hot was the book? It was Taylor Swift hot. Let me give you an example. In the first 3 weeks that the book was out, Fire and Fury sold 1.7 million copies. In comparison, Taylor Swift's album Reputation came out around the same time. It sold fewer copies. It sold only 1.5 million copies. Can you imagine a pop star getting outsold by a book nerd? That's how big this book was. And it gets better. Donald Trump has actually started his own category of nonfiction. I'm breaking the news right here. I'm calling it contemporaneous memoir. Here's your word of the day. Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines contemporaneous, pronounce it correctly please, as happening in the moment. Allow me to use it in a sentence. The generals kept contemporaneous notes on the battlefield. In modern day, this is what FBI agents did when they got called into a meeting with President Trump and got creeped out. They took notes of the meeting. How creepy do you gotta be to creep out an FBI guy? Think about that. On top of it, they wound up using these notes after they got fired. An example of this is Trump's former homie, Comey. Of course, you won't read all the notes. The first editor is the new head of the FBI, Mueller. He's got to go over everything and keep some of it for the court case against the president. But don't worry, there's plenty of juicy stuff left, and you can read it all in James Comey's new book, Trump Lit Has Even Crossed the Border. Mexican presidential candidate and far-left political agent, Obrador in Mexico, wrote a book called Oye Trump, which translated to English roughly as right here, Trump. That book's been a runaway bestseller in Mexico, and as part of Trump's worst nightmare, that book will be crossing the border into the U.S. in September, just in time for Hispanic Heritage Month and the November midterm elections. It's international. I guess everyone's getting in on the action. Maybe Stormy Daniels took contemporaneous notes too. Her book will probably go right to film though. I'm Tony, and you've crossed over to the other side.
Cuando cuenta Cuando se trata de tu familia, llama a los mejores, llama a Monty Ramírez. Soy Jacobo Monty, el fundador de Monty Ramírez. Hace 20 años empecé el despacho de Monty Ramírez para ayudar a la comunidad hispana. Ayudamos a familias y negocios en la área de inmigración. Siempre hemos estado aquí defendiendo el derecho de inmigrantes para lograr el sueño americano. Llama a los mejores, llama a Monty Ramírez.
Breaking news. We're going to have to take Ted Cruz's Latino card away from him. You may ask why I want to deport Ted Cruz from Latinidad. I'll tell you what, let's be fair. You don't have to have a certain political view to be Latino, Chicano, Hispanic. There's a few that are common, but I'm open-minded. But here's what really upset me. Recently, there was a vote at the Senate to decide just to talk about immigration. And you've heard about the plight of the Dreamers. That was on the table. The U.S. Senate met, and they all agreed to just talk about the problem, except for one senator. Ted Cruz from Texas was the only senator to vote against simply talking about fixing immigration. Can you imagine that? Now, when you say his name, I say it correctly, Ted Cruz. Porque él cruzó. He crossed. Ted Cruz. I think we have to talk to Ted because he uses the name, but he ain't in the game. And let's break this down. Ted Cruz, on his original birth certificate, was named Rafael Eduardo Cruz. Now, I don't know how you get Ted from Eduardo. Maybe my English isn't that good, okay? It sounds like it would be maybe Ed, Eddie, Ted. He added a whole other consonant. On top of it, he was born in Canada. So think about that. He's a frostback who came to the US and benefited from the broken immigration laws. Well, let's look at that. You're perhaps familiar with the former law that was called the Dry Foot Law. This is no longer in place, but in the past, if a Cubano got to the shores of Miami, of Florida, and he touched dry land, they were eligible for permanent residency. Now, we have to look at this and decide, okay, how much of Cruz's family benefited from that? He benefited from the Canadian clause, and on top of it, I get it. He benefited from a broken immigration system, but then he turns his back on the community when we need him the most. At the end of the day, it really is terrible to see someone benefit from perhaps someone getting confused and thinking he's Hispanic and voting for him because he's Hispanic when he never helps us out. I want you to declare if you're Hispanic or not, Ted. If you're Hispanic, say, I'm proud to be Hispanic. We can sit down and have that discussion. I've heard him talk about his dad being Cubano. I've never heard Ted Cruz say, I'm proud to be Cuban American, because he's not. He's Canadian. So right now, I want to revoke Ted Cruz's Latino card. If you agree with me, send us a note, send us an email, give his office a call. I'm also going to visit the Canadian consulate. I want to see if they'll take him back. At the end of the day, Cruz crossed, but he's not going to double cross us anymore. I'm Tony, and you've crossed over to the other side. The Other Side TV is happy to launch the Ted Cruz Taco Challenge. I want to find out if out here in Tejas, we have the taco truck, the taqueria, the taco cart that is brilliant enough and has the guts to create the Ted Cruz Taco. Now, what's in it, you may ask? I have the secret recipe handed down from my tia next door. Here's what's in it. Of course, since Ted Cruz is white on the outside,
this taco has to be white on the outside too. So it's a tortilla de harina, kind of fat. So the tortilla de harina is gonna be one of those thick ones, almost pancake sized, right? Of course, on the inside, as you know, Ted Cruz was born in Canada. So we need a nice long strip of Canadian bacon sticking out from the inside of there. Now, around the bacon, a lot of green, a lot of cilantro and lettuce, which symbolizes all the money he's getting from the NRA. I do want to add a little bit of ropa vieja. I'll translate into English. In other words, it's like a Cuban fajita stuck inside. But when you translate the word ropa vieja into English, it translates into old clothes. That's exactly how Cruz treats his Hispanic identity, like old clothes that you hide. So we got to put the ropa vieja deep inside the Ted Cruz taco, because you can't see it till you break it open. So are you ready? Texas, are you the one? Are you a chef that can deliver this? Are you the taco truck? But if you're the one, I need you to contact us at the number below, the email above. I'm Tony, and we're crossing you over to the other side.
Este programa fue patrocinado por el despacho de Monti y Ramírez. Estamos aquí para ayudarlo con sus asuntos de inmigración. Ayudamos a familias y negocios en la área de inmigración.